agreements, which went under the general framework of being called FIPAs, Foreign Investment Protection and Promotion Agreements. Now, the one with China is so different from others because of the nature of the fact that the Chinese economy, being centrally controlled by the People's Republic of China, all the state-owned enterprises are all interrelated and run from the same hub, which is Beijing. So if we were to be sued by, say, Saanich, now that Saanich has bought Nexon, suppose we changed a law in Fort McMurray that Saanich didn't like. Nexon wouldn't have ever been able to sue over that for damages, but Saanich could. So what's driving this? I honestly don't think it's the same, well, maybe a misunderstanding of what China wants, because it's very clear that Stephen Harper has, and he very rarely changes. His attitude towards China has changed 180 degrees. Bear in mind, he boycotted the Beijing Olympics because of the human rights atrocities of China. But he suddenly decided that we want Chinese investment, we need Chinese investment. By his lights, and I've had this explained to me by Natural Resources Minister Joe Oliver, they don't believe there's enough investment capital any longer coming from conventional sources like large multinationals around the world that are not run by Communist China. In other words, they don't think if they have money from China, they will not, they believe that if they don't get more investment from China, the oil sands development will go too slowly. It'll still be developed. I think it goes fairly rapidly. But there's, for instance, right now Suncor and Total SA, which is a state-owned enterprise but of France, have a joint project for something called the Jocelyn Mine. The Harper cabinet approved the Jocelyn Mine and said it could go ahead, but Suncor and Total SA said, well, the economics of this right now don't look so good, we're not doing it. So they want the Communist China money because they believe that they'll defy economics because they're not run the same way, they don't have the same bottom line concerns, and they want a lot of investment money to develop the oil sands as fast as possible. Now, bottom line, do they need this treaty with China to get that investment money? No, they don't. Australia studied investment treaties and decided that as a general proposition, they did not have benefits that outweighed the costs to Australia, so they've stopped negotiating them and won't sign anymore. China and Australia have an enormous level of mutual co-investment. We have about, I can't remember the figure, we have about there's about 10 times more investment in Australia from China than there is investment in Canada from China. But Australia has flat out said it won't agree to one of these treaties. What drives this, I think at least, where's the benefit for Canadians? If Ed Fast, the Minister of Trade, were here, he would tell you that the benefit is for Canadian companies operating in China. That because the rule of law in China is a joke, that the courtrooms of China are essentially theater in which the judges are told how they're going to decide before the court starts, that Canadian companies can't enforce contracts, can't get a fair deal. So if a Canadian company is operating in China, they want access to an arbitration tribunal at a global level that is outside of Chinese courts. But what it means for Canadians is the People's Republic of China has access to suing us in a global arbitration panel without ever accessing our courts first, and in secret, and for billions. China right now, by which to give a real-life example, China is suing Belgium for $3 billion, because they have one of these agreements with Belgium, because a Chinese bank bought a Belgian bank, and you know how the European Union's been doing. Well, the Belgian bank went belly up, so China is suing Belgium for $3 billion. This is a very weird world we're in. Why hasn't it been ratified? Great question. I wish someone in the national media had asked Stephen Harper that while he was going through his explanation of why he was approving the Saanich-Nexon takeover. Nobody in the media mentioned the Canada-China Investment Treaty. My hunch, and I think I'm right on this, is that the reason it isn't ratified is that Stephen Harper's own base is rising up and telling him, what the hell are you doing? They are furious. And there's a great group called Dogwood Initiative out of Victoria, went to the Elections Canada website, pulled all the names of conservative donors, and used that group. It's all publicly accessible information who donates to political parties. They used those actual people as the sample for a poll. So they did a public opinion poll of only conservative donors and found that like 80% of them said not only if this deal went through would they never vote conservative again, they'd never donate again. I'm not sure which ones worried Stephen Harper more, the money or the votes. So, and I know, because I mentioned working across party lines, I never reveal names, that's why people will still talk to me in Ottawa, but there are a lot of conservative backbenchers who've been pushing hard, and in a way they usually don't. They're usually cowed, even in private rooms with the doors shut, they usually don't push back against Stephen Harper, but they're pushing back on this. There's also the threat of First Nations lawsuits. I hope they get to court fast. Now, all of that may not make any difference at all. If Stephen Harper wants to do it, he needs to be prepared to push through and ratify anyway. But I've been arguing as much as I can to those conservatives in his caucus, tell China we can't ratify until at least they change it to say that we'll have the same exit clause from the Canada-China treaty as we have from NAFTA. You know, NAFTA is pretty much recognized as a free trade vehicle that free traders like, but you can get out of it on 6 months' notice. Unlike the Canada-China investment treaty that takes 31 years to get out. So I'm really freaked out about it. If it gets ratified, I don't know how we ever get out of it. So we have to stop it from being ratified.